Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first panelist, Mercedes Obregon, with Instituto Pedagógico para Problemas de la Lengua.
Well, I'm the superintendent of IPLEAP. We make it short by calling it IPLEAP, which is a nonprofit organization founded 51 years ago and dedicated to support deaf children as children with learning and language disabilities. IPLEAP holds 3 core programs, which are School for the Deaf, which gives formal education to deaf children, and after-school support for children with language and learning disabilities who are not having the support needed in their public schools, and a special teacher training program that we started 14 years ago. And all our kids come mostly from poor environments. In 1992, after interviewing deaf alumni that have received speech and language therapy at IPLEAP, deaf young adults were back then, we became aware of a very strong fact, and many strong facts, but most important of all, that at some point of their lives, they all had found sign language as their main channel of communication, despite having been years in oralized settings, in schools where we tried for years to make them speak. And we even, at IPLEAP, that was our model of attending them. So this fact led us to undertake a paradigm shift, developing a program, a school program, not a therapy-oriented program, but an educational setting for deaf children. Now that these days, it's now from kindergarten until 9th grade, and based under a bilingual model where sign language took the primary focus. Through this program, we give formal education to these children, unrestricted access to Mexican Sign Language, and we strive to give them a quality education, valuing their differences and empowering their abilities instead of focusing on their discapacity, in their auditive discapacity, through which they have an education according to their capabilities. We are currently the school in Mexico that attends more deaf students, concentration of deaf students, because inclusive policies in Mexico have tend to take these deaf children into regular classrooms without any support. And so deaf children are very disseminated all over. As I told you before, trying to multiply impact, we started 14 years ago an annual teacher training program for teachers of the deaf that has been attended for over 5,000 teachers from all over Mexico. Alternatively to the deaf students program, IPLEAP never stopped attending children with language and learning disabilities as an after-school program. In 1996, we had the fabulous opportunity to come across the OLE project. It's Optimal Learning Environment Project. It started at the Sacramento and Davis University in California. This project was at first a research project, and it ended up to be a teacher training programs for teachers to teach reading and writing, working with bilingual students, mostly coming from Mexico and Central America. Ole showed us how to land in practice the whole language theories, originating another great shift in our educative approach, changing our individual therapist-oriented intervention into a one social learning intervention, conforming like small groups of 7 or 8 children with similar difficulties, and working together with them in reading and writing, math, and language workshops. Some of the children attend all 3 of them, language, math, and reading and writing. Others just go to reading and writing, others just go to math. And these children are attended weekly, once or twice a week, in this after-school program for a period like 2 or 3 years until they overcome their difficulties. We have been working under this scheme since then, observing great advantages in these social learning environments over the interventions one-to-one. In both of these educative programs, we hold systematically reading and writing workshops, striving our children to learn the joy of reading and writing and to become lifelong learners. These workshops are the seeds of many of our unit studies in the formal education program and are the core of our work with the reading and writing workshops. We have strongly bet in literature as a vehicle to build a rational and critical thinking in our children and to reach a better understanding of themselves and of the complex world that surrounds us. We strive to make them stand in other shoes, to be empathetic, to understand and respect differences as a way to enrich themselves by the diversity surrounding us. And these reading experiences have let us travel a long time along the world and let us know many others' lives to enrich our own. And you were talking about just in the other discussion table about, well, the different paths to get through literacy. And, well, I was thinking we really have found other paths. We don't wait until our children are independent readers. Deaf children may take a lifetime to be independent readers, and so we don't wait until they are independent readers to take them to literature, to put them across literature, that it's crucial for them to be thinkers, to be reflective. And so we do a lot of reading aloud. One reads, another signs, and someone interprets. But we do all the things that you do in any workshop, asking, questioning our students all the time, making predictions, asking for anticipations, making reflections. And so this is a different path to get into literature. I was also thinking that as a child, I'm a reading lover, and I think I start reading because my father told us stories orally every night at his bed. We all gather at his bed, and he told us a story about his hometowns, about his cousins, about something he read, about the war that he heard in the radio, and really, I became a story lover because of those stories. And so there are different paths, and especially with our children, we all see children with different learning capabilities. Maybe we have to strive to look for those paths. Just to end, I think literature, and especially these wonderful spaces, reflection spaces that we have created through the reading workshops, have led us to make, I think, something very important with the deaf students, to give them a voice, to stand, to take postures, to be propositives. And they have been winners 3 times in the Plural Plus contest that the United Nations has a contest for children and youth, and they have been awarded 3 times, being winners of the International Prize Award last year for their proposal in a video called "Eliminate Hates, Eliminate Borders." So that's another way to take them from literature to other things. So thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. It's really an honor to be here. I'm from Learning Ally. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer, and we're a 70-year-old not-for-profit organization. So I think someone mentioned in the first one about innovation. We had to innovate to stay alive. We were originally called Recording for the Blind and Dyslexia. And one of the key lessons learned is that we're dyslexic. Unfortunately, around the country, sometimes it's still that D letter word. And, you know, a lot of states have embraced it, and a lot of others don't. And so dyslexia has kind of not been fully diagnosed. So when we talk about struggling readers, I would beg for you guys to think about dyslexia and a lot of those students getting undiagnosed, and we call them struggling readers. And just a little bit about dyslexia. It's a spectrum disorder, and it has nothing to do with intellect. So I will tell you, there could be someone with a high level of dyslexia and low level of intellect and what I call the wheels falling off the bus. That might happen in 3rd grade. On the other side, there might be someone with a very low level of dyslexia and high intellect and have great coping skills, and for them, the wheels don't fall off the bus until maybe 9th grade. So this is happening throughout all of our education K through 12. So with that, I think we all here today share a common vision about transforming the lives of either students or adults. And today I want to talk to you about how we do that with Learning Ally Audiobook Solution. What we're trying to do is eliminate the barrier for those students who struggle to read so that they can thrive, become believers in themselves, and succeed academically and hopefully in the worlds beyond. So here's our problem. A lot of times when I present, I actually call on the audience, and I ask them to read one by one a sentence in here. This is by Anthony. His parent actually wrote what he was actually saying when he was trying to read Harry Potter. He has dyslexia. He actually happens to be really smart. If you took a minute, we did this exercise as a team, you would see that someone who goes to read that first sentence, and I'm visually impaired, so I'm not even going to attempt because I can't see it that far, spends so much time actually decoding. They focus on the word and trying to sound it out. That's what we call decoding and the mechanics of reading. When you spend so much time trying to read, you forget what you read, and you haven't absorbed it. So these poor students who have a hard time with just the mechanics of reading are not going on to learn and build those critical thinking skills and being able to become thinkers, as Mercedes just mentioned, and being able to relate to it and all the things that we talk about the love of reading, because it takes them so much time just to actually read. And we call that automaticity. They don't have that automaticity, and so it takes them hours upon hours to redo and read and able to learn. So that's the problem that we have. So what human-read audiobooks does, it eliminates it. So instead of just having to actually focus on reading, they can learn, they can focus, they can visualize, they can have the stories come to life. And that's the part that we were all talking about. And when they have that, their world becomes bigger. They can relate. And I don't have to share all the things and the benefits with you guys because you guys all know. But it's so critically important. But what we learned, and this was a really huge learning for us, having audiobooks and providing it to whether it be our homes or to our schools wasn't enough. People or teachers weren't using it. We couldn't understand why. So when we went into the classrooms, they're like, I don't have time, or I think it's kind of cheating, or I'm not sure if there's, how to measure progress. So our job, because we all have the same passion, is going out and finding all the problems. I call it the leaky bucket, and then trying to patch that leaky bucket. So we were always known as an audiobooks company. We have 80,000 audiobooks. I call it all the books that people want and need to read, whether it be Harry Potter or Dog Man, or even all of the science or math books or whatever it may be. But they weren't being read. They weren't being used. Even the people who were buying our product weren't using it. So we had to become a solution. What we did is we had to figure out how to make it so easy for the teacher so that they wouldn't have to hardly do anything. So we came up with customized launch plans, progress monitoring, student incentive programs, you name it. And then we tried to customize it based on how they were using it, whether it be in elementary school, middle school, or whatnot, because that was one of our huge barriers. And so one of the other key learnings is about reading is learning to read versus reading to learn. In elementary school, what we found is that I really believe that teachers have a heart of gold and have the best intention, right? And I would go to school upon school upon school, and they were just focusing on teaching these kids how to read. If I could just teach these kids how to read, then they'll be able to succeed, and they'll be able to be mainstreamed in school and everything else. But what I would like to share with you guys is a problem with that. While teachers are teaching how to read, there becomes a gap. When you guys tell me here stories of kids who are in the 6th grade reading on 3rd grade level, if they're just reading 3rd grade books, they don't have the word exposure. They don't have background knowledge. They're not excited about what they're reading. And so not only is when you're teaching how to read, which is so important as we know, because when we talked about adult literacy and being able to read a prescription or have a job or read your mail, it's critical. But just doing that alone actually bridges the gap between these kids' ability. And then the social emotional part comes into play. They feel stupid, they're embarrassed, they're not engaged. And then what happens is you see one or two things. It could be a student who all of a sudden has this mysterious stomach ache and misses 30 days in the 3rd grade. That was me. Or it could be like my sister, who became the class clown, and she became that vocal kind of problem. So, a lot of the reading and that the problem of reading is our belief in ourselves. And when we don't have that belief in ourselves, it manifests in many, many different ways. So in elementary school, what we're trying to do and educate is when we go to these SPED teachers or when we go to these gen ed teachers in an inclusion environment to teach them that, yes, you have to teach these kids how to read, and decoding is so critical, but let's narrow the gap. And with human read audiobooks, they're actually getting access to the vocabulary and word exposure and content and be able to get excited about what they're reading. In middle school, though, it's actually, and I call middle school and high school together, it's actually really different because school changes. And in middle school and high school, a lot of times people have a curriculum. And these teachers have a curriculum, and they need to, start building critical thinking skills. And what happens in many different scenarios. It could be that they do a read aloud. So the whole class has to go through and they do a read aloud to get everyone on the same page. But when they do that, they're losing so much time on being able to build those critical thinking skills. Other times, they may do leveled readers, where it's kind of like the Cliff Note version. But those kids are missing out on the vocabulary, on the richness of that literature. And so what we talk about in middle school and high school is equitable access to content. And so here, if you have an audiobook and it's To Kill a Mockingbird or the books that they have to read, and students get access to it, then they understand it. Then that stomachache goes away, trust me. Then they're able to raise their hand and participate and talk. And then instead of the teachers having to deal with all the problems of my sister who's the class clown or whoever it may be, now they can start working on comparing and contrasting and relating and all those critical thinking skills that Mercedes was just talking about, and it takes it to that whole new level. And so, it's really funny because when we go across the country and we talk about equitable access, I'll still hear, well, I let the kids bring the books at home, or different things, or I have leveled readers. So people don't really understand the concept of true equitable access so that they can really read and absorb and understand so that they can participate and really thrive. So some of the key learnings is really debunking myths, and I kind of shared some of them. One of them is that a learning difference is not a sign of their cognitive ability. Unfortunately, we still face that today. And so teachers across America, may feel that these students aren't capable of getting access and reading at their grade level because they're assessing their reading skills and they're afraid about their comprehension. And so again, I really believe that people have all good intent, you know what I mean? And they really do care. It's that they need that knowledge of knowing that struggling readers, it can be just a neurological processing issue. It has no correlation with their intellect. The second thing is essential to keep grade level while teaching how to read. And that's the example I was talking about earlier. We all know, and again, those adult literacy programs that we heard, how important it is to get people to read. But we want, and our goal is not just to get them how to read, but to get them to think and thrive. And by just teaching them how to read alone, the gap each year gets bigger and bigger and bigger between their reading ability and their grade level vocabulary and comprehension and background knowledge. So that's a huge takeaway that we want to share. And that sometimes the techniques that people are using, like leveled readers, are still hurting our students today. So for us, and our key learnings is, and I share with all of you guys, is when you have your programs, find out why they're not working. Not so much focus on what is working, but focus on what's not working. And when we did that, we were able to figure out all the things that we need to demythify or, debunk some of the issues. And as a result, we've had phenomenal success. We've grown substantially. Over the past few years, our number of students who we have reached grew 33%. The number of pages read in our audiobooks have grown 66%, and we feel like our impact is growing and growing. Here are some testimonials, and it's more than just the numbers, and I think all of you guys know that. Having students be able to have a belief in themselves and believe that they can achieve in school and think of themselves as not just readers but learners and succeed is what we're all about. I know you guys understand and share the same. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lorinda Ang, and she is representing Resources for the Blind from the Philippines.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really so privileged to be here, coming all the way from the other side of the world. So I've dealt with 3 time zones since Monday, so anyway, where's the clicker here? So I represent Resources for the Blind. Our mission is to make sure that persons with visual impairment will be able to understand and reach their God-given potential in life and services. So basically, we are a Christian organization serving blind people since 1988. So we just turned 30 years last year, and it has been a wonderful 3 decades for us. The model or the approach that we use in our programs is basically focused on the twin track approach. We don't only focus on training or serving the persons with visual impairment, but we also focus on making the people around them aware of their situation and what they can do to be able to help them achieve their fullest potential. Because without that support around them, whatever we do in our side would be useless. So this is the very first thing that we do, child finding. It is very unfortunate that there are so many parents who get so depressed and so hopeless that they hide their blind children at home. They themselves believe that the children will have anything to do outside. They are concerned about their safety. You won't be safe outside. But we have blind pastors, blind employees in our organization who travel alone every day, going to public schools, discussing, conducting Bible studies, and mentoring all these children with visual impairment who are enrolled in this public school. So it is really not impossible for them to go out on their own. They just need to have proper training, orientation and mobility, and the acceptance of the people around them. So the first thing that we do is to find these children who are either locked at home or children who do not have that confidence within themselves. So as they have mentioned, there are these children, their confidence need to be developed so that they would know how to develop themselves. We have been hearing since this morning that literacy is, there is a high degree of agreement that literacy is somehow highly connected to reading. But what if you're blind? the reading is a different thing for a blind. So how do you do that? So we find other ways of reading. So I guess let us not confine literacy into reading, into just, recognizing the words, the printed words that we have here. So what we do is revolutionize and find other ways of reading. There are other ways of reading that we do. Just like we have different formats. Audiobooks is one of the tools that we do. So once we find these children, we have an early intervention program. So as soon as the parents find out that their children have visual impairment, we encourage them to enroll in the program. So again, the twin track approach is not just the baby. So we have babies, yes, in our program because we have to make sure that the parents would know how to raise them at home. It doesn't stop in the classroom. So we make sure that the parents would know how to deal with the moods that their babies or their children has. And then we also coordinate with teachers in the public school setting so that we would be able to know if they have students with visual impairment and see how we can support them. Because without the support that these children would have equitable access, as mentioned earlier, they would not be able to read or gain access to that same information that the other students has. So it closes everything to them. But once they have access to that information, it opens up the whole world. Same information, just different format. Audiobook or large print if they have just very low vision. And we also produce materials in Braille. And we also conduct trainings in Braille. And we also train their parents how to read Braille, read and write, so that when they go home, the parents can assist the children in doing their assignments and their homework. So no one is left behind. All the people around them are trained and made aware of what they can do to be able to achieve that fullest potential that each individual has. So eye care services is also part of our program because there are still children who has a remaining vision. So our goal is to make sure that we maximize the remaining vision that they have. It may be that they just have they just need a high-powered spectacles so that they would have access to the information, or we can just produce large print version of the books that they have. So it really makes a difference once you have those formats available for them because it opens up the whole world to them. Just like what we are training them to use the computers, they use the Androids, yes. They have all the systems. They can do it, just like what their sighted counterparts do. So there, the teachers and the parents training. As I've said, it's a twin-track approach. So after training the parents in early intervention, and we also have our preschool program, once they are ready to go to the mainstream school, we also prepare the receiving teacher to make sure that both of them are ready. The receiving teacher ready to handle the students coming in, and the students are ready to be in the regular schooling. So they are trained on how to move around their schools, and then the teachers are trained and taught how they can modify the teaching strategies that they use, the materials that they use to be able to make the students understand how do you teach color, how do you teach shape. Right now, we already have our 3D printer, so we can actually print out the actual shape, like especially for bigger objects that they can touch. It's easy if it's just a fruit, a spoon, or fork, but if it's a building or a car, they wouldn't have that full visualization of the item unless we print it out. So we already have that service available right now. Over the years, going back to the teacher training, over the years, we have already trained about 5,000 educators to handle children with visual impairment and about 1,000 special education teachers to handle specifically children with visual impairment. Well, unfortunately, many of them already now here in the US using this skill, but so we are continuously training new teachers for them to handle these blind students. So over the years, more and more children, unfortunately, are getting blind. So we have to improve and make sure that all these services are still available for them. So assistive technology, we provide them with tools and gadgets, as I mentioned. They now know how to use laptops and netbooks, the Androids. We have softwares and applications that they can use, and we also have that training so that they won't be left behind. They can do the internet now. They can fill out information, applications online, apply for jobs, do emails, browse the internet. They can all do that right now. And that's one thing that we would like them to have, to open up the whole world to all this information so that they would be able to achieve their fullest potential. One of our students used to be excluded from PE classes because of being blind. How would she play volleyball or, do the dances? So she never experienced PE her whole life. But when she was trained and, she had that confidence and enrolled in education, she majored in PE. And when she went back to her school, she went back to teach PE. So I don't know how she does it, but she was able to do it successfully. She was able to find ways on how to teach it to regular students. So I haven't seen her. It would be wonderful to see her in action, but it's really interesting. There are so many stories, successful stories like this, that if they were not given that same access, that information, those would not have happened. And there are so many information that is related to reading that could be solved only by, giving them another format that they can understand and they can access effectively. So students, leadership, and skills training. As we always say, our services cover from womb to tomb because we have early intervention, and then on education, we have preschool, and then we also support inclusive education in primary, and then for higher education, we also have all these trainings, training them to use the computers. And then after higher education, we also have job placement. So we train them on how to apply, prepare a resume, how to prepare yourself for interviews. So we all have this training. So after job placement, what do? We also train them soft skills, how to deal with your coworkers, how to deal with your boss, and how to move around the office. And then after job placement, if they want to go on their own, find a business or establish their own business, we also have a livelihood program or an advanced training program for that. So it's really, endless, like before the tomb. But if it's really time for them to go, we also, go there and be part of their family. Because literally, most of our students grew up with us. They started at 3 years old in preschool, and up to now, we still have a constant communication with them, just like the person that I told you that I forgot to mention that she graduated cum laude. She majored in PE, and she started with us 3 years old. I guess she's 20 plus right now and teaching at a regular public school. And then, there. Our best practices. The program that we focused on when we submitted our application here is the All Children Reading. So the best practices that we did with that specific project with USAID is that the inclusive school context with built-in support is what we used. We made sure that the school understands what inclusive education is. And we provided the support to make sure that they would be able to fulfill that that system that we are trying to push in. We provided them tools and gadgets so that the materials, specifically Braille materials, would be available in the school level. So it will be faster, because if normally before the teachers ask us to prepare the Braille format of the books, but now they can produce it in their school. So it's faster, because, sending all these materials takes time and, delays. But with the project that we had, it enabled them to produce all these materials on site. So they are readily available, and the students can take them at home, just a few minutes or a few hours of waiting for the materials instead of weeks and months for waiting for us to produce and then sending it to them. And then, as I mentioned, the twin track approach, involvement of parents and guardians and all the people around them. Like for parents, for the preschool and early intervention program, for inclusive education in primary school, we talk with principals. For higher education, with university administrators, and then with job placement, we also talk with the potential employers, so that we are sure that all of these people are aware and informed about what they can do, and that they are prepared. Because unfortunately, many of them are still rejecting our students because of their blindness. All their reasons are, we don't know how to handle them, we don't have the facility, so that's where we come in. This is what you have to do, and this is what we can provide you with, so that they will be ready to accept these persons with visual impairment or with blindness. So as I mentioned, we made the material production possible at the school level, and we also engaged with government stakeholders, the Department of Education, and the LGUs in the areas. We also made sure that we have that partnership so that they will be open to us when we go to their areas. So there, as I mentioned, we used the All Children Reading Project that we had with USAID. It's Reading Beyond Sight. So the project achieved remarkable success in helping students who have low vision or are blind learn to read these books or these materials in the format that they can access and that they can understand. And our consultant organization, I'm not sure if you are aware about, School to Schools International, also based in Washington, D.C., said that going beyond the statistics, the graphs and the data and everything, the team that handled the project literally cried when they saw the results, because that was the first time that they saw significant, very high gains of the students based on the project that we had. So thank you, and I'd like to leave just like Helen Keller said, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much, but with all of you, with each one of us here, we can do many, many, so much more. Thank you very much.
And last but not least, we have Melissa Maus-Kuhn is our next speaker, and she is with the Visual Language and Visual Learning Project at the great Gallaudet University right here in Washington, D.C. Melissa.
I'm going to stay here because it's easier to have visual access. The podium is a little high to be able to see my signs. So thank you so much for that great introduction. It is an honor for me to be here representing my team from Gallaudet University and receiving this award. We are so inspired by this work and to continue the work that we do. I want to start by dropping you into a story. And hopefully the video will play. That was a good 10 seconds of letting you all get involved in this story and then coming back out of it to see where it was made. We worked with a team from Russia to develop that storybook using their Russian folk tales, The Little Mitten. They have a version of The Little Mitten in Russia, The Little Hut. We hired a deaf artist and deaf storyteller from Russia, a deaf team, animators, artists, to create this story. But this story is created in 4 languages, meaning that we create 2 storybook apps that are bilingual. It's created in Russian and Russian Sign Language, and here in America, in American Sign Language and printed English. And so that is a huge opportunity for cultural exchange, for folktales told around the world. To give you a peek of what the back end looks like and why stories are so important to deaf children and why they need access to bilingual stories, which will help them develop their own literacy. As was mentioned, I work at Gallaudet University, which is a couple blocks away here in Washington, D.C. I work for the Center on Visual Language, Visual Learning, otherwise known as VL2. It was established in 2006 to understand how deaf children as visual people learn how to read from an educational neuroscience perspective. We gathered the top neuroscientists around the country to help us understand what the basis for reading was. And what we know is that there's no difference between a deaf child and a hearing child's brain. There is no neurological difference. Children are born ready to learn. The only difference is in how the language is received and the language input. For hearing children, they acquire their language through their ears. They receive audio signals from birth and build their repertoire of language comprehension. For deaf children, the same is true, but it's through a visual medium, through the eyes, using sign language as a modality. But our neurological function is the same. The brain processes language in the exact same way. The brain is simply looking for linguistic patterns, which is how it understands language. And so when children have early language exposure for deaf children in sign language, that is the key because it builds foundations for them to learn to read. If we deprive children of sign language, that leads then to a lifelong struggle of literacy. So we want to turn the tide and go back to make sure that children have sign language resources at an early age so that they can become proficient readers. And hopefully, because I'm in the room of my peers, that we're all on the same page. This is a brief video that is not scripted, it's just a group of deaf children who have access to a bilingual storybook app, which is one of the apps that we developed in VL2. This one is called the Museum of Errors. And you can see the children gathering around the storybook and are engaged in watching the story being told. This level of engagement is high. Children are pointing to the signs, they're learning vocabulary, and language is supposed to be fun. You can see them interacting and owning this experience. And you can see that some of the children are actually copying the signs and learning new vocabulary just from the app. It just gives you a brief window into how children are using it. It's true. Only 2% of deaf children receive an education in sign language, which is shocking. 2%. And part of the reason for that is because of the inclusive education legislature. But the needs of deaf children for language access are so important, but when taken out and put in a public school environment, which is a nice conceptually, but doesn't provide them with the language access they need. And so that has an impact worldwide on deaf children's education. Children need access to bilingual education and a critical mass of signing peers and signing adults who can expose them to this great world of literacy, which is healthy for them. As Mercedes was explaining, she gets it. You're exactly on point. I'm so happy I actually don't have to go into it because she did all the work for me. But when people understand the fact that bilingual education is paramount for deaf children, this is a global crisis, but we have a solution. And yes, we need a lot of funding maybe to make this happen. It's true, I think, as everybody said. But there is a solution out there that we can partner and train people to be able to create these bilingual resources. One more thing. The World Federation of the Deaf, the source of this statistic, is an international organization. And they consult with the United Nations on any issue related to deafness around the globe. So they work with the UN on policy, for example, the CRPD, Conventions on the Rights of People with Disabilities, has language related to sign language access and the importance of sign language access for deaf children. And the advisors of that language was the World Federation of the Deaf, to make sure that all deaf children have access to their inalienable human rights. Our platform provides a solution because we've developed a storybook creator, meaning that anyone in the world can develop their own story in their own language and put it into the platform. This is an app-based platform, and I wanted to point out the importance of some of the design elements so that you understand how the platform works. The storybook creator has 3 modes: watch, read, and learn. And I'm going to show you the read mode. This read mode goes through page by page, where the story is written in printed sentences, and children can access a video translation of those sentences. So that if a child is struggling to read the word in English or to understand the concept, they can open up the video and then see the entire sentence translated. They can also click on the highlighted words and see a video presenting that particular word in sign language, then fingerspelled with a manual alphabet in American Sign Language, and then signed again. And all sign languages have a manual alphabet, which is a representation of the printed text, which makes it a lot easier for deaf children to map on their language to the printed word. And so being able to map those terms and those signs in a way that is fun and enjoyable for the children is key. Just wanted to show you, or give you a brief journey through some of our apps. We've been working with different artists, native storytellers, to produce several different stories. And so far, we have created a total of 9 original ASL English bilingual apps. And other countries have reached out to us, and so we've been working with international teams to do translations of 6 additional stories in other languages, which means that we have a total of 15 apps available. What we've seen is that these 3 modes, watch, read, and learn, provide the ability for children to use the watch mode to see this mini video where the illustration is overlaid with the visual sign language production so that the children can watch the story in its entirety and really dive into the story environment. We see children fascinated and engaged with watching these stories and understand the story in and of itself before they move to the read mode, where they see it in both languages. And we've been working around the clock to expand our storybooks around the globe. We have a team in Norway, Russia, another in the Middle East. We've done some translations in Saudi Arabia, and we're happy to announce this year that we're partnering with a team in Thailand. Very exciting work, because they have so many ideas to present Thai folktales for deaf children. And deaf children often grow up not having access to their own cultural stories because they don't have anybody to tell them those stories and pass on those oral traditions of their culture because of this language deprivation and the limited access that they have to sign language. And what's cool is that they're not only produced in other countries, but those stories are then translated to American Sign Language and English so that both stories are given to children who know ASL and English, and we can have this cultural exchange for deaf students across the country and across the globe. We work as part of a team, and we have many elements. We train teams around the world to produce these storybooks because it's really about the deaf community being part of this ecosystem. We have so much hidden talent in the community, and it's important to empower people to learn how to do filming, editing, digital media in order to document sign language, because sign language does not have a written equivalent. Video is our written equivalent. And so having that skill in the community preserves our language, which is critical. It empowers people, development is fun, and we are growing our digital library. We also host different story times with parents and families so that they can learn how to read aloud in sign language with their deaf children and develop shared reading time. Also, for parents who can hear, learning sign language is so critical, and that's a part of the app that we empower parents to learn sign language and sign with their children. And all of this goes into the work that we do. We also travel to schools training teachers to use our storybook apps in the classroom. We develop lesson plans and other curriculum resources. So one storybook has many other resources attached to it. And this is our favorite character from our first ever app called the Baobab. This is our digital library thus far, and you can see that there in many different languages. And there are more to come. I'm thrilled to receive this award because that money is going to go directly into producing new apps and produce new stories for deaf children. And so I'm going to be busy for the next year. To sum it all up, why the work is important, why we do what we do, is because with language, we are human. And it starts with young deaf children having access to sign language so that they can develop critical thinking skills, can express themselves, and make connections with their family and with the world at large. And with that, the possibilities are endless. But the journey has to start somewhere, and it starts with language. Thank you.